really honoured to talk about today is based around the Singhnia of 1984. I hope you guys have been watching all the brilliant podcasts, the brilliant talks that have already taken place. We've got Harjinder Kaur, who's already done one. We've got the Basics of Sikhi podcast, which was a 4-part series. Just a quick hands up, did any of you get to watch all of that? Because it had such brilliant background into it all. So I'm hoping that you've got some context already about 1984, about the main figures, about the Sangharsh, the reasons for it, and kind of the impact of it afterwards on the Sikh Qawm. So I just want to bring your attention to this picture for a moment. And I know on the podcast, the last one, Bhai Shamsher Singh talked about Bibi Kaur ji, who was the wife of Shaheed Bayan Singh ji, who was the one who assassinated Indira Gandhi. And just take a look at that photo. To me, that speaks 1,000 words, literally. There's a Singhni, having so much presence at such an intense time of Sikh history with the Sangat there at the time. And as I was coming into the Gurdwara Sahib to Matha Tek for this talk, the Kirtani were singing a Shabad, Gobind, Gobind, Gobind Sang, Naam Deho Man Nina. And that Shabad actually is about somebody asking a question to Maharaj, that can I be saved as well? And in that Shabad, it gives examples of people who have tread on the path of bhakti, of devotion, of dharam. And it names the different bhagats and how even, not just the bhagats, but different people who have come from all sorts of backgrounds, not necessarily been brought up in a dharmic way. They may have come from like a background where they're sinning or where they're ignorant. But in that Shabad, it gives us so much hope that when you read about each person and how they attained WhyGuru in the end, it gives us hope. It shines a light to us that when we share stories of people who have actually tread on the path, who actually walk on the marg, the Panth, it shines a light for us. And I think that is so important. I think that's what Maharaj is trying to bless us with today in this day and age. We're talking about 40 years, remembering 1984. And I feel like the biggest thing right now that we're doing right as a Qawm is storytelling. Not stories as made up stories. These are real lived experiences of people. So I want to go into the talk concentrating on a particular Singhnia, because I feel like there's been so much Parchar already, Maharaj Kirpa, and that's a very, very good thing. When I channel my social media, I see lots and lots of Panthic stuff, I see lots of representation of females, and I'm so happy about that. That is such a good thing that we're using social media for that very reason. There's a lot of context behind 1984, so I feel like you can go onto the internet and find everything, and you'll notice probably some of the content that I've got ready for this talk is being pulled from different interviews, it's been pulled from different write-ups about Singhnia as well. So I'm trying my hardest not to kind of repeat what you might know. Loads of you, all of you, are more learned than I am. You guys have been attending this, I think the Expedition Expo last week, you've attended the talks. You know so much, and I don't want to sit here and act like, look, this happened, that happened, when you guys probably know that and much more. Baisab has written books on 1984, which are really, really helpful as well. That's by Harjinder Singh from Kaur Publishers. So do your research if you haven't already, but I bet you guys have. So just to give some background into the role women have particularly played, a lot of you, even your children, might recognize a lot of these photos here. I was thinking about what role Bibi have played and whether the stories I'm going to share with you today are just a new phenomenon, or have they actually been there and like it's come from Maharaj's time? And although I've written Supreme Bravery and Sacrifices of Sikh Women in History, 1700s, it could go back before that, but I 110% believe from 1699, when Guru Sahib blessed us with Khande Di Paul and turned us from saint soldiers, I feel like there was a change in women as well. Not just our men, but I think women changed so much at that time. And you've got pictures of Bibi Harjinder Kaur, 1704, when the Chote Sahibzade, you know all this, you know, she went and did the sanskar, even if it meant losing her own life. You got Mata Gujar Kaur Ji on the top right with the Chote Sahibzade. First Shaheed that we know of as a Bibi happens to be the wife of a Guru Sahib, you know, the mother of a Guru Sahib, Tan Sri Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj, the grandmother of the Sahibzade. Guru Sahib, the one thing that we all, I think, appreciate more than anyone else from different, and it's not a comparison, but I think we can say it with pride that in our faith, what we can appreciate the most is that Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj, they didn't keep anything for themselves. And that is so unique. Their own family became Shaheed. We know that. And I think we take it for granted sometimes. And then you've got Singhnia who went on the battlefield. You've got Singhnia who did rescue missions. You know, people who were not afraid to give up their life. And this theme continues. That's what's amazing. So I just want to give some context on that. So today I'm going to be talking about Prem Wali Sikhi and Siddiq Wali Sikhi. So you may have heard that in Guru Sahib's time, Guru Sahib mentioned that there's 5 types of Sikhi. And in that 5 types of Sikhi, there's Hirs di Sikhi, which is based on greed. So you basically adorn yourself as a Gursikh and make out you're a Gursikh, but actually what you're after is finances. Your interest is in money, and that's it, and wealth and what you can gain, your positions. Yep, there's Vyahar Wali Sikhi, which is your occupation. So it's based on like, okay, I need a job. Why don't I just become, you know, a Granthi or something along those lines? Now, there's no debate, there's no controversy. Obviously, if that's your job, that's Satkaryo. But your intention should not just be, okay, I just need a job. Don't really care about Sikhi. Okay. There's Dekho Dekhi Sikhi, where we just see someone and we want to imitate them. Okay, so those type of Sikhi, those 3 types of Sikhi are not accepted by Guruji. The other 2, Prem Wali Sikhi, based on love, and Siddiq Wali Sikhi, based on full faith that you'll follow every bhajan of Guru Sahib, those are Parwan, those are accepted by Guruji. And these Bibia that I'm going to put a spotlight on today, I feel like they're shining examples of that in various ways, which hopefully will be illustrated today. So the first one is Mata Harmeet Kaur Ji, and at the back you can see the picture of her husband, Amar Shaheed Bhai Amrik Singh Ji, who was huge in the movement with Sant Janel Singh Ji, and I'll go on to talk about her in a moment. Then you've got Mata Preetam Kaur Ji, who's the wife of Sant Janel Singh Ji's PA, Bhai Rishpal Singh Ji. You've got Bibi Harjinder Kaur Ji. And then right at the end, I've put down countless others, 1800s, how it must have been for people writing the Ittihas, which was so few and far between. We're so lucky we've got access to these people. So the first 2 Bibia are still alive to this day. And we'll go on to talk about Bibi Harjinder Kaur, but I'm sure most of you have heard about her as well. Also, the reason why I put a question mark on the 4th one was, who knows, the next ones might be you guys. It might be from your lineage. So who knows, Hannah? So Mata Harmeet Kaur Ji, like I mentioned, she's the wife of Bhai Amrik Singh Ji, and that's a picture of her wedding. She was also the daughter-in-law of Sant Gyani Kartar Singh Ji Khalsa Pindrawala. He was the Jathedar before Sant Janel Singh Ji of Dam Dam Taksal. He was the one also who fiercely stood up to Indira Gandhi when she started the emergency, when nobody else would stand up to her. So really like powerful character. And one thing about them I was reading in their Jeevani, Pavitra Jeevan, was the standard of Sikhi that they kept in those days is so hard. And I feel this way about whether you're Dam Dam Taksal Singhs and Singhnia, whether you're Babbar Khalsa, or other jathebandis, I feel like the standard was so hard to live by. And having had some experience of living in India for a few years, relatively in leisure compared to what they had to live like, I just can't imagine, how much dridta, how much willpower they had to have to kind of be accepted to even join that family. So prior to Mataji's birth, their family was blessed to have Sangat of Inspirational Guru Sikhs regularly. And in second grade, so you can imagine very young, like these kids, she asked her own parents that, can I be blessed with Amrit? And then later on, her Jivan was such that at age 22, and by the time of her Nandgaj, her wedding there, she had 17 Banis memorized and were doing, and this is Sant Gyani Kartar Singh Ji Khalsa's own words that are recorded, so we've got them. She was doing 75 Japji Sahibs daily. 75. That's huge. And what I like about a lot of the content that's brought forward today is that it's either from witnesses who were with them, or it's either recorded. So it's either their own interviews or somebody that is witness to it. So 75 Japji Sahib parts daily, and another Sant, part of Damdami Sal, Sant Gyani Mohan Singh Ji, spent 14 years in her Pind, and she would do the seva of taking them lassi and milk. So one thing is to have bhakti and to have your own kind of your own targets spiritually, but then to make sure that you're always blessed with humility as well, because it's very easy to get egotistical when you're doing so much job. She was doing like Hathi Seva from a young age. So during Operation Blue Star, at that time, by Amrik Singh Ji and Mataji, at that time, they already had 2 daughters. So one son was on the way. She was actually pregnant with him at that time. And their eldest daughter is Bibi Sarveen Kaur Ji, who was 6 years old at the time. And she's done a lot of interviews. I'd really recommend watching them. She's done a lot of interviews and books herself. Second daughter was Bibi Paramjit Kaur. She was 3 years old in 1984. And then their son, Bhai Talochan Singh, was born in August 1984, a few months later, a couple of months later, just after their dad attained Shahidi. So Bhai Sahib told his daughters to have a Nitnemi Jivan. And their daughter, the eldest daughter, Bibi Sarveen Kaur, was only 4 years old, 4.5 years old when she was given Amrit. So you can tell that they were brought up in such an amazing atmosphere where Amrit, Gursikhi, Nitnem was key to who they were, their whole identity. So fast forwarding a bit, on 3rd of June 1984, Bhai Sahib meet up, and their mother's there at the time, their wife Bibi Harjinder Kaur is there at the time, and their children, their 2 daughters are there at the time. And you might have heard in the previous talks that from the 1st to the 3rd, there was kind of firing, especially the 1st or the beginning, there was firing where the kind of army and everyone who came to attack were just doing it to kind of work out where the positions were, the strategic positions of the Singhs that were fighting back and the Singhnia. So before, obviously the mahal was getting worse, and before it was going to get really bad, Bhai Amrik Singh Ji stopped and he thought, okay, let me go and check in on my family now. And at that time he said, I think you guys should leave. It's going to get bad. There's no return from this. Bhai Sahib asked his mother first to take his wife and kids and go. And his mother agreed. He already spoke to her about what to do after he leaves this world. Mother agreed and said she'll take the eldest child, because Bibi Ji at that time was saying, what about you? What's going to happen to you? I'm not sure if I want to leave at that time. And Bhai Sahib kind of surprised her at this time, and I'm trying to give it like an honest portrayal. I don't want to make it something it's not, but she said she was surprised when Bhai Amrik Singh Ji said, I'm going to attain Shahidi here. That's my plan. That's my target. Bibi Ji said she was shocked. Bhai Sahib said, I've been waiting for this for such a long time now, and it's finally arrived. Okay, so Mataji insisted that she's not going to leave. She wanted to stay with Bhai Sahib, and because of that, Bhai Sahib didn't force her either. So mother and eldest daughter left, and Mataji stayed with their 3-year-old daughter. Okay, after they left, then a husband and wife, Bhai Amrik Singh Ji and Mata Harjinder Kaur, had a heart-to-heart. It was going to be the last time they get to speak. So this was the time when Bhai Sahib gave his last wishes. And can you imagine, as a wife, what a big kind of responsibility falls on your shoulders as you hear that kind of bombing starting or firing starting, and your husband's telling you, okay, I'm not going to be here anymore. This is what I want you to do. And at that time, he told her that I want you to educate our children. And she said the reason for that is so that they are able to articulate and spread the message of what they were fighting for. And to this day, now this Bibi Sarveen Kaur, the eldest daughter, she's like a director of schools in like the Tarn Sahib, and she's doing so much to kind of bring Sikhi to grassroots level there for kids that do not know, even though they're based in Punjab. So that's kind of like coming to fruition. And the thing that's not put in there, but Bibiji mentioned, Mataji mentioned, that Bhai Sahib also mentioned to her that clear this debt that they had as a family, because they actually used to live off very little. They never used to take the Jatha's money. Even if the children used to want to, like, you know, play with money like sometimes our kids do when they're very, very young, they would always make sure they take that money back and always say, no, this is for the Panth. So they never really kept anything for themselves. And so one of the last things he said as well was, please make sure you clear that debt, that loan that we took. And what did she do? She did that. As a true Gursik, they made sure that all their lekha, their lena deni, everything was done before they attained Shahidi. So as the shooting continued, Bibiji's brother was also there. So they had come, they went away, and then they'd come back with like prashada, with water bottles and things like that. And they'd come back with so much that Bibiji said, hang on a sec, this is too much. What am I going to do with all of this? And at that time, their brother said, well, Bhai Sahib said it, sent it for you, for not just you though, go and take it for all the other women and children who are stuck in the Langar hall. So they were thinking not only like we need to fight the army and defend Darbar side, but they were also thinking about the innocent women and children that were trapped there. This is the compassion. This is kind of illustrating the saint and soldier side all the time throughout them fighting. So Bibiji went there, as she was told. She took the prashada and everything for the kids. And the kids had to, the mums were putting cotton wool in the ears of the children just so they can reduce the noise of the guns going off. And that night, later on, Mata Harjindar Kaur, her daughter, and remember she was kind of 7.5 months pregnant at this time, she managed to escape out of Sri Darbar Sahib, and so did other Singhs and Singhnia. So I just wanted to share some personal experiences that I've had with Mataji. So I first met Mataji in like 2005-06, and then later 2011, and she stayed with us for 3 days, and then 2017. And we were really lucky to go and have a heart-to-heart with her. She's, at that time, I think 2005, so I must have been in my 20s. And I was so like, poorly, you could say. I remember saying to her, one of the questions we did, because there was a courageous event organised at that time, and the Bibi were all allowed to ask her a question and do a Q&A. My question to her was, Bibiji, did you want to get Shaheed at this time? Were you thinking, yeah, I'm going to give my life? And she said, no. She said, what we witnessed was so horrific and traumatic that actually did not cross my mind. But that doesn't mean there was no love for Sikhi there. But what I realized from that is, don't romanticize the Sangharsh. Don't romanticize it. This is actually excruciatingly difficult. Karnyo thiki, walo niki. Only a few people can walk on that path. That's not to say that they're not Gursikhs. Her duty was, her seva was to raise her children, to raise awareness, and she's done that. But I just wanted to give that, because sometimes people think, oh, I'm supposed to be one way, but there's, Maharaj's got every way welcoming a mindset or a contribution to the Panth. So somebody asked her when they were at our house that, can you please share with us something really spiritual? And I know this is going live, so I don't think she'll ever watch this, but if she ever did, I'm sorry. Probably not supposed to share this, but it was amazing. So her pind was Nemuksa Sahib, which is where the Chali Mukte, that jung took place. And she said at night, very often, around about 12 o'clock, the villagers would hear horses galloping, and they knew there was no one there. But it was that Shahidi Bera, that kind of spirits of the Shaheed sings at night. And she said one day, so this was post the attack at Operation Blue Star, and she said one day, you know, she was left with, now it was 3 children, and she started feeling like, oh my gosh, it's a really daunting kind of task that I've been left with to raise them by myself. Can you imagine, you've got such inspiring Gursikhs around you. You had Sant Kartar Singh as a father-in-law, you had your husband Bhai Amrik Singh Ji, you had Sant Janel Singh Ji, they had their Sangat, and then you had all the other Singhs who were Bani Barnwale, you had all that kind of atmosphere around you. And you know what it's like, if you ever hang around with Sangat that are kind of spiritual, you're immediately uplifted. But those moments when you're kind of bereaved, you're aggrieved, you know, there's a lot going on in Punjab at that time. In those kind of vulnerable moments, Mataji said that one day she went to their local Gurdwara Sahib, and there was no one else there because it was very early. And she did ardas to Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, really heartfelt ardas, that please Guru Sahib, whatever happens, please bless my children to be Gursikh children. And she goes, when she went to Matha Tek, she got up and she saw Shaheed Singhs around Tan Tan Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, and she saw them write down this ardas, and they said to her, Hanji hor daso Mataji, like, what else do you want? And she was just obviously overcome. And at that point she said they took that kind of letter and gave it to Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj and gave the ashara that your ardas has been fulfilled. So that was so special for her to kind of share that with us. And just on a side note, like, despite being from such a, you know, powerful family, from such a, you know, a family that we really look up to, Mataji is so humble, so humble. She's so understanding, she's so warm and welcoming and wise. And I remember that time I had my first son, and one of the things I said to her was, oh my God, I'm failing completely. I can't do my Nitnem. It's on like a, you know, on a iPod. It was in those days or something. And I'm, you know, up and down changing his nappy, doing this and that. And she was like, you know what? She said, don't worry. Every single Bibi goes through this. She was like, honestly, don't worry. And I was just like, wow. And this amazing Bibi was normalizing the kind of daily little struggles that we have. So I wanted to share that about her because she's a very special soul, and we're very lucky to have her. The next one I want to talk about is Mata Pritam Kaur Ji. And according to one of the interviews that I've listened to about, well, it was her talking, she met Sant Janel Singh Ji on 25th of July 1982. So this is when the Dharm Yudh Morcha was taking place. So this is right at the beginning, you know, just when the first kind of agitation was happening, so to speak, where people were courting arrests in thousands. And when she came to Darbar Sahib, Sant Janel Singh Ji happened to notice her and said, how did you get here when there's so much like, you know, force, and it's so difficult to get here? And she was just like, you know, a normal person. And she said, I didn't even know anything. She goes, I didn't know anything. I didn't come from like a religious background or anything. And she goes, Sanji was so impressed that I'd made my way there that they said, you know what, there's something special about you, and I want to keep you in the Jatha. And so Sant Janel Singh Ji arranged their marriage, Mata Pritam Kaur Ji's marriage, to their own personal assistant, Bhai Rashpal Singh Ji, and that took place in February 1983. And then another amazing spiritual experience that I'd like to share, that Mataji has shared herself, was she was saying at one point, you know, she had so much respect and so much pyar for Sant Janel Singh Ji. And I don't know if you saw the video that was shared on social media recently, and it was like this fortune teller. So that goes to meet Sant Janel Singh Ji. And she's trying to read Sanji's future and past. And Sanji just smashes it at the end and just says, well, you kind of turned this way when you were 13. And she's just like, yeah, I did. And, you know, it was just incredible. And those kind of glimmers, those glimpses of their spiritual avastha are very few and far between available, only because it seems kind of biased because you've got these kind of people that have spent time with them and everyone thinks they're biased, or you've got the kind of militant kind of narrative. But this was another story that Mata Pritam Kaur ji shared. And she said one day she had so much longing to feed Sanchi Prashada. And this was a time where Sanchi used to eat with the Singhs when they were at the Darbar Sahib complex, Manji Sahib, and around the complex. And so it wasn't likely that this was going to happen. It was highly unlikely, in fact. But she still nevertheless had this very strong urge that I really want to feed Sanjanal Singh Ji from my own hands. And she mentioned it to her husband, Bairishpal Singh Ji, and they said, oh, you know what, when we move to our own house, maybe then you can feed them. But I don't think this is quite appropriate. But nevertheless, she got the turka done to masar mungi dal. She went the next door and found a tawa, and she gurned some atta. And then they made their way to where Sanchi was with all the rest of the Singhs in a different part of the building. And she kind of just stood in the background. And there was one point when Sanchi got up and they were going to have their normal prashad, they'll go about their day. And all of a sudden they just said, okay, let's go to room 27, which was their room. And when they got in there and they were like, Bibi, you want to shakar's prashadda? They already knew the desire. She had not mentioned anything. And Mataji got very happy, obviously, and she was just like, I got the kind of newspaper out, I started rolling out the prashad there. And they said that day, Sanji normally used to have 2 prashad there at a sitting. That day, apparently, they had 3. That was the love that they could taste from those prashad there. So they had that prashad there, and then afterwards, she kind of just stood there with, hath jod ke. And Sanji kind of knew what they wanted. They wanted a spiritual blessing, And Sanchi said, it's not really in our maryada to put our hand on somebody's head. It's just amazing, to be a sant, to be a jathadar, and still say no. They used to say, don't matadek to us, we don't want to put our hand on your head. But because that was like a very private setting, and they knew it was about the bhavna, which is always what Guru Sahib used to do in the old days as well, where bhavna was, that used to come first. They put their hand on her head, and she describes it as the most goosebump moment that she's ever had. She felt like electricity was going through her. And Sanji said to her, so she did a beinti, she said, please bless me with courage for whatever seva I am blessed with. May I fulfill it happily and in Chardi Kala. And then they replied, all the seva is yours and you are doing it. And blessed her. So the beinti that they done, you'll see how that's come to fruition in her life as we go forward. So just briefly, just a few months later, Mataji gave birth to a baby boy. That was May 19th, 1984. The June attack started from the 1st, and they're still on the complex. When they were born, the Singhs were really happy. They mentioned that this baby didn't even cry, even though it was Jeta Mahina, which is excruciatingly hot, 45 degrees, unbearable, no ACs, but the baby was kind of very calm, and Sanji named the baby Manpreet Singh. So 1st to the 3rd, 1984, like I mentioned, there was on and off firing. Night of the 3rd, Mataji was giving her baby milk, and her husband was trying to make a phone call and realised, okay, the electricity is being cut, the telephones are not working, the water supply is cut, and he had kind of discussed this in secret with Sanjanal Singh Ji that this has happened. Next day, early morning, 4:45, the army started attacking inside the Bar Sahib and coming onto the Parkarma with bombs. And Bibiji, Mataji was only told of this situation on 4th of June. And that was because they didn't want to worry her, because obviously she was mothering this young baby. On the morning of 4th of June, so later on, they moved downstairs to the wet cloth store, where in anticipation of the attack, they had stored some dried food. Okay, so 6th of June, about 12:15 a.m., Bairishpal Singh Ji, he recited Kirtan Sohila, and by this time you can imagine, it's full attack is full underway. The bombs are going off, and Singhs have become shaheed at this time. Bhai Sahib recited Kirtan Suhila, then kissed the baby and said his last fateh and was going on to the Parkarma to face the enemy. But just as he got up, a bullet first hit the 18-day-old baby. And obviously Mataji was carrying that baby. It pierced the baby and went straight into Mataji's chest, that bullet. Bhai Sahib obviously saw his Singhni Mataji fall down, and she was in pain. The baby was shaheed. And just as he turned around, because obviously he was facing the other way, wasn't he, to leave, and he's facing the other way, and just as he's about to go towards her, a bullet comes and hits him in the head, and he falls on top of Mataji. So she's got her shaheed baby and shaheed husband on her own sarir at this point. Then, one of the Singhs are around, they find out, they go out and try and fetch her some pani because she's in a lot of pain, but then even that Singh gets captured by soldiers. The army came into the room and got Mataji out, and they got other civilians, and they told them to all gather. They were about to shoot them, but then another voice from a different officer came from a different area and shouted, "Don't kill them, but hand them over to him." So it was the morning of 6th of June 1984. Still the firing, the main kind of jung had happened. Soldiers took Mata Pritam Kaur and the survivors to the library. The Akal Takht Sahib, look at what they saw. The Akal Takht Sahib was smoking and on fire. Rooms were burning. The survivors were walking over dead bodies. There was blood everywhere. The Sarovar water was red in colour, and some bodies were floating in the Sarovar. Children and women were dying for water. So the soldiers sat the survivors, including Mataji, down, and women were crying out for water. Mataji just kept quiet. And after a while, they let some of the women go and drink water, and the children, but they had to drink that bloodied water. It wasn't even good, decent water that they gave them. Then they started looking at Mataji a bit different, and they suspected that she was someone important. And then they went and they brought over 3 sevadars from the SGPC to identify her. They all knew who she was, but they didn't identify her. And because of that, all 3 were shot dead on the spot. So they thought that would scare Mataji to kind of make her, say who she was. But she didn't fall for it. Bibiji, then, she was still obviously in a lot of pain. There's no treatment, still boiling hot weather, no water. She just kept on doing her Simran, and they just made the civilians just suffer there. So we've been so lucky because in Singh's family, there's a member that's been part of this Sangharsh and then went and spent time 4 years in jail, in the same jail as Mata Pritam Kaur ji. So I really wanted to share this with you. So they said, from his point of view, Bhai Harjinder Singh, he said that on 8th of June, that's when they started IDing all the people. And he said 9th of June, they had 500 ladies and 1,100 males, all taken to kind of a school that was like a 3-story school, come kind of a prison that they were using at that moment. And then they put charges on some people. So out of those, we know that so many people, innocents, lost their lives. They were just normal pilgrims, civilians that had gone to Darbar Sahib because it was Shahidi Purab. A lot of them were killed on the spot. But they managed to figure out that 28 were put into the Class A, which is the most militant type. And they had the charges on them for terrorism, things like that. So they took Mata Pritam Kaur ji and a few other survivors to other jails and army camps. And Mataji said that she went to 2 other jails before she got to this jail in Jodhpur in Rajasthan, which is not in Punjab. So you're not around familiar people. And we used to notice it when we used to drive to Rajasthan. It was it's foreign. It's you can tell you're not home. And, it's very dry. It's much more hot. They always have a lack of water there. So it was she's put in this kind of by herself. She's put in jail, and when Bhai Sahib got there in March 1985, she was there, and there was an innocent Bibi, so somebody had nothing to do with being a freedom fighter or an activist, called Bibi Harjinder Kaur, and she was also in that jail. So there was 364 Singhs with them as well. So at that time, they went through so many tortures. I mean, Baisab writes in his account, he says, they were beaten up, they were, given all the kind of physical tortures you can think of. They weren't allowed to eat for 2 days, didn't even drink water as they travelled from Amritsar airport to Rajasthan. They were given 5 kg of water to last them a month to do ishnan with. And that is nothing, absolutely nothing. They were given 100 grams of soap to kind of use for a month to do their ishnan. They were given no bani. So this was kind of like at least the first half of their time at Rajasthan. Because then what happened is the great General Lab Singh Ji and another Singh who is quite famous in the Sangharsh, Harminder Singh Sandhu, were also came to this jail. And Harminder Singh Sandhu was a double MA in English, so he could kind of advocate for the rights of the prisoners there. And so eventually, what he describes, he goes, there were kind of 3 barracks, okay? So there was kind of, the people that say that Sanchi was part of Congress or kind of a government person, this just blows us out of water, even years later. Because he goes, there were 3 barracks. So you had like Harchand Singh Longowal, who was part of the kind of, let me deal with the government and make a deal with them, even though it meant compromising so many of the rights that Sanchi and the Sikhs were asking for. He said, so there were followers of him, and they were put in a separate barrack, so let's say barrack A. Then there were Sikh Student Federation put in the second barrack, and then there was Damdami Taksal or those kind of things put in the third barrack. And he goes, the 2 groups, apart from the first Longowals, they were tortured so badly all the time. Randomly, people would come in and start beating them up. He goes, whereas if you were a Longowal supporter, so like a government supporter, you were treated really well. You used to get your prashad dabani, whereas they just had 1 black tea and like 1 really runny dal a day. They would get their bani, they would get the prashada. If they were ill or injured, they would get medical treatment straight away, but the other things were not. And they were kept in such a bad way that a lot of them passed away because of the injuries that were sustained and that were not treated. They were ignored all the time. But then what happened is, as the international Sangat started getting involved, the Singhs mentioned General Lab Singh and Harminder Singh Sandhu, they started advocating for rights, and I think there was some pressure from international human rights as well. So they said, at least let us celebrate Gurpurb. At least let us do that. And it was astonishing because these Khalsa Sikhs that were in jail, battered, bruised, deprived of rights, ill-treated, spat on, name-called 24 hours. And if any of you have read that study of Dr. Emoto's, where he's got water and they put kind of really negative words or horrible words around it, and then he's got separate water with really positive affirmations going around it, you can see the affirmations, what they produce, and the crystallization that happens. So if you're around really positive vibes and positivity, the body turns really well crystallized. Whereas if you're around negativity all the time, then it becomes the opposite. It doesn't form properly. And like they were in that environment, in the thick of it, but still, despite this, when they did their Gurpurb celebrations, they would still serve langar to the workers there and the jailers that were torturing them. That's how incredible they are. This is the saint soldier side. So then eventually they got Sevadars from Guru Nanak University. They used to come in and teach sometimes, and it was so amazing because they had old water pipes that wouldn't work. And so what they started doing, because they were not, part of their torture was, they were not even allowed to read Gurbani or do Simran out loud. So they had to say it really low, otherwise they'd get beaten up. So what they started doing is they found these pipes where they could connect to each other and communicate. And then this is where this Singh that told us this, he said he did his Guru Granth Sahib Ji Santhya, his Dasam Granth Sahib Ji Santhya, all in this time. I mean, this is the epitome of Chardi Kala. So obviously, yeah, like I mentioned, some got physically ill and died due to no treatment, and some actually became mental and still received no treatment. So the 2 Bibia that were in jail were based in a barrack near the Dioris. So as you entered the police, the kind of prison, they were at the kind of entrance. That's where they were based, and they had a lady police officer watching over them. And what they witnessed was Mata Pritam Kaur ji and her lifestyle. They said even in that, even injured and in that kind of environment and, you know, going through so much torture, she maintained such a pure lifestyle. She was always reading Bani, doing Simran, doing Kirtan and accepting God's will. She was brave. This is her another Karku Singh's words about the Singhni. She was brave, she was fearless, and she stayed in Chardikala for 5 years in that jail. Even after losing her husband, her baby, her loved ones. So this is how amazing she was. Seeing her pure lifestyle, even the police wardens, the women that were the police wardens around her, they used to touch her feet. And they started washing her clothes. They started doing her seva. And then when they used to celebrate Gurpurbs, they would do a Khand Path in the jail. And they said at that time they got Mata Pritam Kaur ji and Bibi Inderji Kaur, they got permission for them to join the Singhs. And she used to come and she used to do, they describe it as a Ras Binne Kirtan, so moving, so emotional, which would just inspire all the Singhs. Now imagine Mata Pal Kaur ji, who was in one of the first slides, you know, encouraging the Singhs, giving them haunsla. This was like a living example of that. And as she was leaving and going back to her prison, she would always say to the Singhs, stay in Chardikala. That was always her message to them. And there's, you know, not only did she change the kind of the jailers around her, but even Bibi Inderji Kaur, who was just an innocent, who got arrested with her, she became a Nitnem Sikh as well. She became focused on Gurbani. So there's an amazing, amazing Sakhi that, you know, it'll make me choke up. But one day, there used to be an internal court there, and every 15 to 20 days, the Singhs were called there, or the freedom fighters were called there, and, you know, a judge would be there, sitting there, other officers would be sitting there. And so this Singh that was telling us, he was saying that one day him and another group, it was their turn to go and do that. And as they entered, they noticed that Mataji was already standing there with Bibiji, so she'd had her kind of turn. And, you know, she was going to leave as they were going to come in. But just then, there were already Bibia officers, female officers ready to take Mataji and Bibi Inderji Kaur back to their barracks. But all of a sudden, a male police officer, inspector, so not even just a regular one, an inspector came and put his hand on Mataji's shoulder and said, hurry up, in a really rude way, in front of, and at that point, in front of the lawyers, the judge, you know, the other police officers, she just turned around and slapped him. And she said, Dushta, like enemy, how dare you touch me? And I think that just, you know, that just shows the purity, the kind of like, you know, the bahadari, the virta, the kind of large, I don't even have the words to explain. She turned around and slapped him and said, how dare you touch me? And he had to turn around and apologize to her. So can you imagine this kind of spiritual prowess in a jail where everything is against you? And then later on, when she does one of her interviews, I think she came to Seek to Inspire camp in 2017, and when she was talking, and she said, you know what, if you look at my body, I have got wounds and scars on every inch of my body. They didn't, you know, leave her or kind of omit her from the tortures. She took much more than her fair share. And as a Bibi, I can't comprehend that. She said, every inch of my body is full of scars. And she said, you know what? But with grace of Guru Sahib, I'm still in Chardikala. And one thing she does Parchar of is, don't be scared to die. And I think that is amazing. So even after she left this jail, the harassment still continued. Her 3 brothers, who were 2 were in really good job positions, and you can imagine the breadwinners, they were all made shaheed by the police. So they constantly harassed her. Her story is, you know, sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. And still, I watched a video of her the other day saying, Asi shahida de varasya. Asirondeni, like we are the heritage, we are the, you know, we come from the heritage of shaheeds, of martyrs. And you know, there's like that film 300 that some of you might have watched, and you know, they go through this massive jung, there's only a few of them that take on so much, And right at the end, there's a scene where one of them who got sent because he was injured, and they said to him, you get out because the rest of us are going to be martyred. You get out. And he's telling the story of how they became martyrs. He's telling that to the next generation who are going to fight. And I feel like that's what these people, living people, are doing for us now. They're lighting that light within us to say, look, if and when the time comes, don't forget that somebody before us has gone and done it. And with Guru Sahib's kirpa, and all based on Gurmat, it can happen again. So I'm going to move on to Bibi Harjinder Kaur, and this is one of my personal role models. When I read about Bibi probably 20 years ago or so, I just find it kind of absolutely crazy that a 9-year-old could be so firm in her faith. So most of you might know this already, but thanks to Mata Harmeet Kaur ji, she gave me a piece of the missing puzzle, so I'll mention that at the end. So most of you might know this, Bibi Harjinder Kaur ji was only 9 years old when she started saying, I want to be an Amritdhari. So her parents were not Amritdhari, her siblings were Amritdhari, but she was like, I want to be an Amritdhari, I want to be an Amritdhari. And Sant Kartar Singh ji, who we mentioned, who was the father-in-law of Mata Harmeet Kaur ji, they used to do Parchar everywhere, sometimes doing 7 or 8 a day, which is absolutely phenomenal. You know, that amount of Parchar in one day, traveling in India. So every year they used to come and do the kind of gatha or the smagams around the Shahidi of the Sahibzade, the Chote Sahibzade, Mata Gujri ji, who we saw in the earlier slide. So they would do gatha, kirtan and vichar in memory of them. And she would go to that and she'd be so inspired that I want to take Amrit, I want to be, you know, part of that, you know, lineage and that legacy. That one day at 9 years old, she presents herself at Nama Sanjar. And she says, I want to take Amrit. And 5 Singhs, obviously, their duty is to make sure whoever comes is actually ready and capable of maintaining that Rad. And, you know, at first they ask her, they say, you know, you're a bit young. I don't, you know, are you here by yourself? Are you here to take Amrit? And she said, and as they kind of, not doubt her, but they kind of, they have a duty to make sure that whoever is presented is capable of understanding what it involves. They kind of say, like, maybe you should come back when you're a bit older so you understand. And at that point, she said, you know what, the shortest Sahibs they were so young. They're tender ages of kind of 7 and 9, or some say 5 and 7. You know, look how young they were, and they gave their lives for Sikhi. And with her young words, she wins the hearts of the Panch Pyare, and they bless her with Amrit. And then later on, she goes home, she's ecstatic. Her soul is on another level. She is ecstatic. And she's doing Kirtan on a Vajja at home in the front. And her father comes home from the Kirtan doing his farming. And he sees she's wearing a Keski, and he sees that she's wearing the Kakar, you know, the Gatra, the Kirpan. And their father's like, what have you gone and done? Why have you gone and taken Amrit? I told you not to. And then she just gives one kind of example of what it means to be Amritdhari. And she says to her father, she goes, how many dogs are there in the village that you can see that don't have a master? And he goes, I don't know, I don't care. Why are you asking me such a silly question? And she said, well, like those dogs that don't have a master, that just roam around, they're stray. She goes, they have to go begging, looking for food. They have to look for shelter. You know, sometimes they get kicked away, they get beaten. And she goes, we're like that when we're without a guru. And she goes, my Guru Sahib, our Guru Sahib has blessed us. They're like the master who looks after their dogs, and you know, they make sure that they're fed. They make sure that they're looked after. And she goes, this gatra that we're wearing, she goes, this is my Guru Sahib's leash, and I belong to them, and I know I'll always be looked after. And with those words, I mean, who can argue with that? So Mataji's kind of Jeevani is incredible. She later on, as she grew up, so the things on the right, that's by Fauja Singh Ji Shaheed in 1978, and by Gavel Singh Ji as well. And they were incredible Singhs, especially by Fauja Singh Ji. Please take time out and read their Jeevani. Incredible, so much warrior, saint, soldier spirit, and yet still so humble that they would pick up the feces, that people's excrement around a Gurdwara Sahib premises, with their own hands to clean the Gurdwara Sahib, because that's the amount of prem that they had for Guru Sahib and Sikhi. So she started getting sangat with these Gursikhs, and later on, they knew that the situation was getting worse, and it was building up to that time. And Bhai Sahib, Bhai Khwaja Singh Ji and Bhai Keval Singh Ji became shaheed in 1978 against the Nakli Nirangare. And, that really inspired and moved Bibi Ji. So while a lot of the Sangat were mourning and they were upset, something stirred in her. A spirit stirred in her really deep. And, she'd go and think, I hope that one day I am lucky enough to give Shaheedi. And, she used to have such an amazing jivan that she would be up, Amrit Vela, she'd go outside and do her shnan and then, do her bhajan and her nitnem and stuff. And at that time, she goes, there was one day, she was doing this ardas that I hope one day, Maharaj, please bless me with Shaheedi. And there was one time where she went outside as normal in the early hours, and she saw the spirits of Bhai Khwaja Singh Ji and Bhai Keval Singh Ji sitting on her boundary wall. So these great Mahan Shaheed Singhs that she used to have the Sangat of when they were physically alive came to see her, and they gave her the message. And they said, Rano, because that was her home name, the Panth needs Sikhs like you. Your time is close. Be prepared to sacrifice this life of yours for the Khalsa Panth. So she already got this affirmation from the people that she loved and inspired her. Then, she went on to become a Parcharak for other Bibiya. She used to take a jatha of ladies from villages to wherever it was needed in that time, because remember, times were getting more and more, there was more and more agitation. It was getting towards the Dharma Yudh Morcha in 1982. She would protest. And in this, the protest that it mentions is, she, with her jatha of Bibiya, laid down on the railway lines to stop oncoming trains. Like, how brave is that, to kind of protest against what the government was doing? And she was imprisoned several times as well. So she was a motivational speaker. She was an RE teacher at Punjabi Girls High School in Tarn Sahib. And there was an incredible time where, as you might be aware, in India, there's a lot of kind of sexual harassment, especially that Bibiya on the receiving end of. Is very unsafe in India. And as she was a teacher at the Punjabi Girls School, some of the girls started saying to her that when we go on the bus ride home, there's a group of kind of 5 or 6 men who are like aged between 20 and 25, so a lot older, who start harassing us. And they mentioned that to their teacher. And one day she was like, right, she went to the bus stop and she waited for all the kind of the children and the students to get off that bus, and she noticed that those 5 troublemakers were there and they were messing around. She went on the bus and she said to them, get off the bus. And of course, they ain't going to listen to her. She's just a Bibi. So she already knew this. And she, under her shawl, was carrying a gun. And she said, get off the bus. They obviously got off the bus. And then it goes on to mention that, she kind of beat them up and also, hit them with the butt of the gun. And she said to them that, don't you ever talk to Bibiya like this again, or sexually harass any Bibiya again. And as they were running for their lives, she shouted back to them and she said, this is my name, this is where I live. If you ever want to come and meet me, I'll be ready. So this was the kind of spirit, this is what she was about. And later on, she got married to Bhai Harbhajan Singh, who's in that photo. So you can see Bhai Amrik Singh Ji, Mata Harmeet Kaur Ji's husband, and then Janel Singh Ji giving pyar on their wedding day. And this was the last wedding. So there's 5 weddings on that same day, and this was the last occasion of a wedding taking place there. And, the reason why she got married was all to fulfill her mission of Shaheedi. That was it. And, they married her off to Bhai Harbhajan Singh Ji, and her sister sent her a request. Her sister was married to her brother-in-law was in the Royal Air Force at that time, so obviously they're well off, well-to-do, not based in Amritsar. And she said to her, I'll send you some really fancy suits because I couldn't make your wedding. And she said, I don't want your suits. Send me your son to fight. She's talking about her own nephew to give up your life. But this was the spirit that she lived in. This is Jivan Mukt, or dead while living. It's that kind of avastha. And then when Operation Blue Star took place, she had the final seva of going around and supporting the Singhs at that time. So her seva at that time, she was going around with onions because it counteracted the tear gas. So the chemicals of the onions would counteract the tear gas so that the Singhs could still see. So she would walk around with onions around her neck and onions and giving them to the Singhs. And she met her husband at this point as well, and he kind of laughed at her, and she said, look, there's no time to laugh. She said, this is the time to give Shahidi. And she said that don't, whatever you do, give your Shahidi at this point. Don't turn around. Don't run away from this. And then she went off. So those were the last words. She said, make sure you give your life to the Khalsa Panth. So what happened to him, he actually ran out of ammunition when he was with the Singhs. She was somewhere else. And as he ran out of ammunition, he got rounded up and got caught. And at that point, he said that they were all made to stand up and they were being shot at point blank. And somebody shouted out and saying, because they needed to make it look like it wasn't as bad as what it was, somebody shouted out and said, we need a Ragi Singh and a Granthi Singh to do the seva in Darbar Sahib. You know, because obviously the Kirtan and everything was still going on, but people were getting shot. Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj was getting shot. So that just happened to save Harbhajan Singh, because they said he can play tabla. So they sent him to do tabla seva. So he got Kirtan seva. And then after that, 2 years later, so he came out of Operation Blue Star. He reiterated all of this to her family. So he shared this experience to her family. And then in 1986, he was still hunted down by the Indian government, and he was made Shaheed in the end. And I remember talking to Mata Harmeet Kaur when she was at our house, and I said, Mata, did you know about Bibi Harjinder Kaur? And I was asking her about different families that had given their life. And she said, yeah, I know Bibi Harjinder Kaur. And I said, oh, you know, when they give her Jeevani online, they say they don't know what happened to her, but, 100% sure that she gave Shahidi. But some say she was made Shaheed in that Operation Blue Star, and some say she might have been captured, taken to prison, and they've made Shaheed. And she said, no, she goes, what happened was she was doing that kind of onion seva, but they had arms on them as well, so it was her and another Singhni. And she goes, as they were going round, the army noticed them and stopped them. And, as they would, they say, stop, put your hands up. And as they went to kind of just stop and put their hands up, a gun fell from underneath their junni. And she goes, there and then Bibiji was made Shaheed. So can you imagine thinking back to that soul who was ecstatic when she got blessed with Amrit? I just feel like her soul was ecstatic at that point when she gave her life up at Harmandir Sahib. So that was just like missing piece of the puzzle. And we're so lucky because in kind of West Midlands, we've got relations of Mataji as well, Bibi Harjinder Kaur living. So I just want to take this all back to Guruji, and I like this verse from Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara. I feel like it's so powerful because it starts with Sacha Sikh, Sacha Guru. And if you think about this whole kind of chapter of 1984 and like the Jeevnis that we're highlighting, truth is what we all stood for. Sant Janel Singh Ji stood for truth. The true Sikh, so this is highlighting Sikhs that they stayed true to their Sikhi, and then of course the true Guru, without whom none of this would be happening. Our Guru, Sache Parchar. So this Shabad starts, Noon Sahib da Khaika, Ran Andar Lad Mare So Jape. So true is he who is true to the salt of his master and dies fighting for him in the battlefield. Okay, but I was thinking about this and I was like, wow, it could be true is he who's taken that Amrit as well. Because we've taken from Maharaj, and then we give our life up. So it's almost like, I was taking it in different ways, but I was like, it's remembering that we can't always be a Kirtan, although we end up being, because we're Kal Jugi Jeev, but these people lived this verse and this whole Shabad. So Sir Vade Hathyar Kar Variyama Variyam Snyape. So one who beheads the enemy with his weapon is known as brave among the warriors. This bichhe jo istri thapate de vare sarape. His bereaved woman, so the widow of a Shaheed, is established as a sati, capable of granting boons and curses. This is what Guru Sahib, by Gurdas Ji, say about women who have, one, if you're dying already for Maharaj in the battlefield, that you're already true and you're great, but if you're even a wife of somebody who's a shaheed, then WhyGuru, you can grant boons or curses, you can make or break people. That's how much Shakti, a power you have in your words, and how much you're blessed. Pote Potvari Vadirian, Parvare Sadar Parapa. So sons and grandsons, they're all praised and the whole family becomes exalted. Vakte Upar Lad Mare Amrit Vele Sabat Alapa. So one who dies fighting in that hour, and it says hour of peril, but you know the timing. Timing is so crucial. Sometimes we think it's our timing, and I think, gosh, you know, timing is so crucial for those people who don't stand up at that time, what happens? But then Maharaj sends somebody like Shahid Byan Singh, Shahid, Bhai Khair Singh, Bhai Satwan Singh. It was like Maharaj says, it's never too late, but make sure you do stand up. Timing is important. And it's also, this Shabad talks about, you know, dying fighting when it's needed, but at the same time, not forsaking your Amrit Vela, your Bhakti. And look at the lives that we've covered. All the kind of challenges that the Bibia, the Singhs went through, they never gave up the Amrit Vela. And this is exactly the same as when Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj left Anandpur Sahib with the Singhs, and that Sarsar Nadi, the river, at night, and it's, you know, hailing down, the Mughal armies behind them, the hill Rajas behind them, and Maharaj says, no, let's do Asa Diwar. So it's always kind of remembering the anchor is Gurbani, the guide, the navigation, the whole system is Gurmat. And Saad Sangat Vich Jaika, Home Mar Mare Aap Apa. So going into the holy congregation and facing his desires, he wipes out his ego. So this is not about ego. This is not about hating people and labels and my religion's better, males better, females better. It's nothing about that. It's about serving and losing your own ego. Lad manna ta sati hon, Gurmukh Panth Puran Pratapa. Dying while fighting in battle and maintaining control over your senses is the grand path of Gurmukhs. These Singhs and Singhnia were tortured in jails and still feeding langar to the jailers. You know, it's unbelievable. It's out of this world. Such a Siddhak, such Peer Pachapa. So in whom you repose your full faith is known as the true Guru. So coming to the end of the talk now, there's Vyant Shaheeds. You can see in the picture there, Bibi Kaur, two Bibi Paramjit Kaurjis. You've got another Rano, you've got the family, you've got Bibi Resham Kaur and her baby who was put on an ice block, screamed, I'm assuming screamed to death because the police interrogated and tortured her so much, killed her as well. You've got Bibi Mandeep Kaur, who was the sister of a 16-year-old freedom fighter known as Goldie, and she was raped and tortured countless times. You got another Bibi Hardeep Kaur, who was, she was kind of just giving prashad pani, and you can call her as a sympathizer, but she got beaten up so badly and tortured in the most brutal ways. She developed cancer, and they wouldn't let her get treatment for that. She accepted Bana, and she accepted it all and said, I wouldn't change a thing, and she passed away from that. And you got a 15-year-old who just happened to have a picture of Shaheed Singhs in her purse because she looked up to them. She was taken away, never seen again, later identified in the cremation grounds that Bhai Jaswant Singh Khalra found out when her sister identified the exact same gara from remains and said that was hers because we have the exact same one. You've got Bibi Kaur, who was fighting with Bibia and shooting. So she was in the front of the battlefield. So there was another Bibi there, Bibi Davinder Kaur. She was part of a kind of a kidnapping plot in the end against some tyrants. But these people, they knew exactly what the kind of outcome was going to be. There was no other outcome other than giving your lives. So all these Bibia, all these children in these pictures, you know, being children taking their lives by strapping bombs to themselves to stop the tank from entering Darbar Sahib, is incredible. There's so many, like I mentioned earlier. So I just want to give a last kind of takeaway from this talk. So, you know, we're all together, we're all the Panth now in 2024, and, you know, we're all normal people, and as normal people, you know, all of us have that kind of element of a bit of toxicity inside us. That's just, you know, we're not perfect. I heard this wonderful saying in Gatha once, and somebody said that, you know, like we've all got that bit of us that we might brush each other up the wrong way, but that when we come together as a Sadh Sangat, you know, just like bees have that kind of ability to sting one another and hurt each other and make mistakes, they carry that with them. But when they come together, they make honey. Yeah, and honey goes on to with so many medicinal properties, and you know it goes on to help so many. But just like that, you know, we might sometimes not get on or not see eye to eye, and you know, even with Operation Blue Star, there's such a grey area. Some people might say it's like this, it's like that, yeah, and with Sikhi and with, you know, roles in the Panth. But when we come together, we should always remember that we're that group as the Sadh Sangat. And Maharaj talks about that Sadh Sangat is where WhyGuru themselves exist. So I want us to take that away. And I think the biggest message of this talk, and I hope that is illustrated in the Jivniya, is Gurbani Paro, Amrit Shako, and not just taking Amrit, but keeping the Rayat, and have love for the Khalsa Panth. Because in my sort of 20 years or something in this realm, I've seen people who read Gurbani, and they can read 100 Japji Sahibs a day, but they have no love for the Khalsa Panth. And all they're interested in is increasing their own spirituality. I've seen people who have love for the Khalsa Panth, and they go on missions that are nonsensical, that don't align with Gurmat. And they don't read Gurbani, they don't take Amrit. And therefore, their missions might be in their eyes for the Khalsa Panth, but actually, I don't think they get the Khushi of Maharaj. So my takeaway for you is that everything we do should be centered on, just like the Bibia that we've mentioned today, just like all the Singhs, Sant Janel Singh, you know, everyone that we've mentioned, Gurbani Paro, Amrit Shako, and keep the Rayat that's prescribed, and have love for the Khalsa Panth. Because as a Khalsa Panth, we've got that job to make that honey in this world. I probably said lots of mistakes and perhaps misrepresented some of the stories, and I beg for your forgiveness. I can't speak anymore. Thank you so much, Ji. WhyGuru Ji Ka Khalsa, WhyGuru Ji Ki Fateh. Sat Sri Akal. Does anyone have any questions? No.
You must have a question, sir. No. Manjinder Singh. No, of course.
I just want to say very nice. Very good talk. Vinny today. It was a very good talk.
Thank you. Thank you all. TKG.
Just a couple of plugs. This Sunday is the 84 rally in London, so please attend. Get in touch with your local brother. There's coaches going from across the country, so please go down to the rally. Also, next week's talk is by Bibi Harjinder Kaur, who's doing a talk on Bibi Kaur, sorry. So please attend if you can. And just another one,